You are not born into Rome. You are born into a life that Rome decides looks movable. This is your first lesson in empire. If it can count you, chain you, and sell you, it calls that civilization. Freedom leaves fast when armed men are efficient. To them, this is not tragedy, it is inventory with legs. Then the empire introduces you to logistics, which is suffering arranged for better resale value. You learn quickly that misery does not need translation. Rome appears magnificent from a distance, which is very useful if you prefer not to inspect what powers it. Even dehumanization has grooming standards when money is involved. Congratulations, your body is now a public product review. You do not know it yet, but your whole life is about to become labor, fear, survival, and the strange Roman talent for calling ownership order. Rome loves law, records, and procedure, which means even cruelty gets excellent paperwork. Your value is now official, and not a single part of that sentence improves your day. Here is the next lesson. Slavery in Rome comes in many flavors, and all of them taste like someone else owning your time. The system is efficient enough that even the broken are used to process the newly broken. Roman management style is wonderfully direct, obey fast, work hard, and do not develop a personality in the wrong direction. Childhood does not disappear all at once here. It is worked out of you one order at a time. The house runs beautifully if you ignore the fact that it is powered by exhaustion. This is the Roman miracle, making dependence look like elegance. You learn very quickly that accidents are only human if the human in question has rights. By the time the first night ends, you already understand the rule: survive first. Feel later if later survives too. Your real life begins in the dark because someone else's comfort starts long before dawn. You become useful the Roman way through repetition, fear, and the motivational power of being replaceable. Survival advice here is tender by local standards, which means whispered and full of despair. You are close enough to luxury to polish it, and far enough away to never mistake it for yours. Nothing says dignity like appearing in the same category as furniture and amphorae. Rome calls this discipline, which is a very Roman way of saying terror with management language. Dinner tastes different when it arrives as proof you were useful enough not to discard yet. Freedom exists all around you, which is almost more insulting than if it did not. Memory becomes dangerous now because it keeps suggesting you were once a person before law reclassified you. You are alive, which in Rome means your labor has been approved for another day. Slavery ages you efficiently, because fear is excellent at removing whatever softness childhood forgot to surrender. By now you know the house better than the family does, which is impressive considering you are legally closer to equipment than to people. Experience in Rome is mostly the art of becoming useful without becoming noticeable in the wrong moment. Maturity does not bring freedom here, only upgraded exploitation with fewer excuses allowed. This is the Roman domestic miracle. Human labor so constant it becomes decor until someone spills wine. Hope survives in spaces too small for dignity, which is rude but efficient. Ownership in Rome is deeply versatile, which is a polished way of saying your body never fully belongs to itself. Roman society is outstanding at pretending normality after something unforgivable, mostly because it wrote the rules. You are becoming more capable every year, which would matter much more if capability and autonomy were on speaking terms. You are no longer a captured child, just a more expensive form of trapped. Then Rome decides your talents are better used elsewhere, because being property means every change in your life arrives as someone else's optimization strategy. Welcome to agricultural slavery, where the scenery improves slightly and everything else gets worse. The countryside feeds the empire beautifully, mostly by eating people first. Roman management remains loyal to its core values: productivity, fear, and not confusing ownership with responsibility. This is one of Rome's favorite illusions: abundance appearing naturally from land that just happens to scream quietly. Efficiency here means learning that compassion is considered a scheduling problem. Community survives anyway, because humans are annoyingly persistent even when treated like broken tools. On the Roman spectrum of suffering, farm work counts as one of the better subscriptions. Rome is not held up by marble. It is held up by backs. Time on the estate does not pass, it loops, which is a clever Roman way of making years feel like a single prolonged command. Skill earns you trust exactly the way a sharper plow earns trust, useful, monitored, and still very much owned. Discipline remains the Empire's favorite public performance because terror works best as a shared viewing experience. Even inside a machine built on domination, people keep committing the deeply inconvenient act of caring. Roman freedom turns out to have levels, but even the worst free life still gets to be called a life instead of an asset class. Every system this cruel eventually inspires the same fantasy, that somewhere a different ending is possible and heavily armed. Hope becomes tactical now. Less dream, more probability calculation done by someone very tired. This is the genius of oppression. Make survival so exhausting that rebellion has to compete with tomorrow's hunger first. You finally understand the deepest Roman truth: injustice here is not an accident, it is infrastructure. You wanted to believe this life was temporary, but Rome is very committed to making temporary pain into permanent policy. Survival is no longer a hope, it is a routine, which is somehow even more insulting. You have become what the system wanted: durable, skilled, and careful not to die too fast. Then new people arrive and you recognize your old face on someone else. You pass down survival advice inside a structure that should not even exist. Every brutal system grows the same rumor, that somewhere people are finally being unreasonable. Rebellion begins exhausted and terrified, yet more coherent than the people in charge. Roman domination is simple. Make trust dangerous and watch oppression outsource itself. Hope is alive again, which would be inspiring if it weren't trying to get you killed. The machine still runs, but some of its parts have started thinking treasonous thoughts. For the first time in years, tomorrow feels uncertain, dangerously close to freedom. Then comes the moment every empire claims is irrational, the second when the owned stop behaving like furniture. Roman order looks less eternal once enough desperate people decide to test the hinges together. Revolution begins with logistics, because freedom is difficult on an empty stomach. Not everyone becomes heroic on schedule, which is unfair but normal. And here arrives Rome's favorite plot twist: violence is easier when you have been budgeting for it all year. Courage performs beautifully until it meets cavalry and legal immunity. This is the closest you have come to choosing your life, which explains why it feels like dying. The dream breaks partially, bloodily, and just enough to become legend later. Rome responds to rebellion with the emotional subtlety of a hammer dropped from a balcony. You reached for freedom and touched it, which in Roman terms is usually enough to earn a long punishment. Rome believes in education, especially when nailed to a cross by the road. The empire always wants witnesses because terror is much more efficient when it gets an audience. Survival has returned, but now it comes with the charming aftertaste of guilt. Nothing restores Roman confidence like extra rules layered over fresh blood. Hope has not died exactly, it just learned to whisper even smaller. The system adapts quickly. Oppression hates friendship as much as it hates labor with knives. This is what defeat really looks like, not one grand ending, just the awful requirement to continue. Civilization is a remarkable achievement when you define it as getting used to horror structurally. You finally understand why empires fear the enslaved so much, because even broken people can still imagine otherwise. The machine survived, but the idea remains. That is why Rome kills so theatrically. Time does not heal anything here. It simply teaches your body how to continue under terms it never agreed to. Rome learns from rebellion the way predators learn from being bitten, by becoming more organized and even less charming. Congratulations, you are now senior property, which sounds like promotion if your moral standards have been beaten with a stick. This is where hope becomes administrative, not will I be free, but what paperwork, luck, and corpse count would be required. Rome loves exceptions, because exceptions keep the entire nightmare emotionally solvent. Then your life gets redesigned again, because being property means your future is just another asset management decision. Welcome back to Rome, now with more commerce and the same lack of rights. The city runs on trade, And trade, as usual, runs on people whose names the ledgers do not bother respecting. Roman society contains many kinds of misery, but ownership remains the premium package. You have left the fields behind, but Rome has many ways to exploit a body before it calls the day productive. Urban labor has a different smell: sweat, smoke, and money, all held together by coercion. Rome's economy is extremely sophisticated if you define sophistication as counting everything except dignity. This is one of Rome's favorite jokes. Your quality of life may improve, but you are still property. Freedom here is uneven and unfair, but it still gets one luxury you do not: consent. Nothing stabilizes a brutal system like the occasional miracle dependent on obedience and luck. The closer you get to trust, the more insulting it becomes, because the chain is now purely conceptual. Hope ages badly in captivity, but somehow it keeps crawling back into the conversation. Rome lets slaves save toward a future it still has every right to cancel. No longer freedom for all, just enough personhood for one exhausted body to stand upright legally. You have lived long enough for hope to become modest. Then comes the dangerous stage where everyone treats you almost like a person, and somehow that feels worse. Rome trusts a slave with business before it trusts the idea that slavery is absurd. Praise arrives in the Roman format: flattering, practical, and fully compatible with ownership. The closer you get to the top, the more embarrassing the people running it begin to look. Freedom comes with strings, duties, and the general mood of a lease extension on your humanity. You receive personhood only because someone wealthy finds it aesthetically appropriate. Liberation granted by ownership still smells suspiciously like ownership with better branding. Rome excels at suspense when the stakes are your entire existence. You see the machine: marble above, labor below, and law making the arrangement respectable. You now understand exactly how obscene it was to be denied freedom this long. By now, you are what Rome calls reliable, a word for too useful to lose and too owned to respect properly. To them, you look almost free, which is one of the cruelest optical illusions this society produces. Experience in slavery is mostly the art of passing down damage in a helpful tone. Rome now trusts your judgment, just not enough to let it legally belong to you. Nothing says affection like complimenting a man you still technically own. Then you meet the Roman version of freedom: legal but supervised, human but with footnotes. Your future now depends on someone else choosing to stop being obscene at a convenient hour. Hope has become embarrassingly specific, which is what captivity does when it matures. You are closer to the door than ever, and that only makes the hallway feel longer. You have outlived fear, and now you face Rome's favorite game: delayed humanity. Then it happens. A master finally decides your personhood fits the household image. Rome loves ceremony, especially when it wants cruelty to look civilized in retrospect. After a lifetime of being property, the law suddenly remembers you have a pulse and calls this generosity. Freedom arrives with paperwork and hierarchy, a firm reminder not to get ideas above your station. The smallest acts become absurdly large once they finally belong to you. Rome grants status in layers, and your new layer still sits several floors below dignity for the well-born. And there it is, the Roman masterpiece. Liberation that remains professionally entangled with obedience. You own your time now, at least the parts your patron and poverty do not immediately claim. Freedom feels less like triumph than like the first full breath after years of breathing politely. You are free now, a truth inseparable from the fact that someone once had the right to deny it. Freedom turns out not to be a clean ending, just a harder life with better ownership boundaries. You build a life the Roman way, patiently, strategically, knowing one bad patron relationship can ruin everything. Rome does not really enjoy letting people go. It simply learns to call control by more refined names. Nothing complicates gratitude like watching the machine continue to eat people exactly as designed. You become evidence that survival can occasionally embarrass the system. Structures this large do not collapse because one brick learns to speak. This is the strangest part. After all the terror, normality arrives looking almost suspicious. Memory remains a loyal Roman institution. It keeps excellent records and charges interest. You are proof that law can stop owning a body long after history has trained that body to expect chains. You won a private victory against an enormous machine, and the machine barely noticed. Eventually, age does what Rome almost managed first. It takes your strength and leaves you with memory as the main remaining burden. The system is still here, efficient, polished, and embarrassingly unashamed of itself. Nothing ages a survivor quite like watching his own beginning happen to someone else on schedule. There it is, the question history always leaves to the wounded instead of the philosophers. You could say freedom is joy, dignity, selfhood, all the beautiful words Rome denied you for years, because the honest answer is less inspiring and much more useful. Even after all this time, ordinary possession still feels miraculous when your own body was once excluded from the category. Respect arrives late, but late is still a dramatic improvement over auction blocks. You survived long enough to become a person in law, but memory remains privately committed to the earlier version. You are no longer owned, yet a part of you still lives like tomorrow could legally disagree. In the end, there is no grand reversal, no Senate apology, no marble plaque admitting the empire was obscene, just a body that finally stops carrying it. The room is yours, which sounds small until you remember there was once a legal argument against even that. Dying people are always expected to summarize history politely, as if trauma were designed for tidy conclusions. Maybe the whole road comes back at once because memory enjoys dramatic timing when the body no longer has veto power. For all the empire took, this much it failed to keep. The final body is legally your own, and that is how it ends. Not as a slave, not fully healed, but at least not as inventory. No senators attend naturally. Oppression rarely likes funerals that imply memory. This was the most radical thing Rome ever allowed. A name in stone without an owner attached. Nobody can sell what remains of you. History performs its favorite trick, preserving the marble while underreporting who actually paid for the whole performance. Civilizations are much easier to love once the screaming has been edited out of the architecture. In this version, empire looks noble and suspiciously underpopulated by those who worked unpaid. Reality survives only in fragments because polished memory prefers labor without faces. Rome built wonders, and wonders love pretending they assembled themselves. The person disappears first, then the grief, and what remains is a civilization congratulating itself structurally. Polished stone is easier to inherit than moral clarity. Every generation polishes the marble a little more. The paperwork changes, but power never loses its taste for making labor disappear behind elegance. What were you? Captive, survivor, or just one more human forced to carry a civilization that barely admitted you existed? The world calls the empire great before it bothers asking who built it.